I'm Jeff O'Keefe, the Executive Director of Zen Peacemakers, and I'm so honored to welcome our friend and guest, Roshi Kipp Ryodo Hawley. Um, Roshi is currently the president of the White Plum Asanga, and the White Plum is the greater community of successors and so forth of Taizan Maizumi Roshi from Zen Center Los Angeles. And Roshi trained at the Zen Center of Los Angeles with a number of teachers there, um, and is the author of Three Steps to Mindfulness from about 12 years ago, and the Zen Mindfulness Cloud Book. And I didn't know this before. Roshi also attended Berklee School of Music, which means that we're going to need to get together offline sometime and talk about music. Uh, Perhaps you were there when Pat Metheny was there. I don't know. That would be fun. So, at any rate, without taking up too much airspace here, I'd like to welcome Roshi and thank you for talking to us. And we're just a few, what is it, 1, 2, 3 days ahead of Father's Day, and that was the inspiration here, was talking about parenting broadly and fathering more specifically, and but without setting any parameters or goals for your talk, I'll hand the baton to you, Roshi. Thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Interesting. So we're connected with the Zen Peacemakers at GCLA, of course. That's one of our affiliations, and our former abbot and current head teacher, Wendy Yoku Nakao, is one of the founders of Zen Peacemakers with Roshi Bernie Glassman. So my Dharma lineage goes through her to Grandpa Bernie, so I can go with that. It's nice to meet you, coming to you from the traditional lands of the Tongva people. I think it's very nice that we're bringing this up when people give talks. They're always saying where they're from. So we're more connected with the earth. And here in Los Angeles, California, these were the lands of the Tongva. And I've become interested in them because they live sustainable lives for somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 years. Not quite sure. One little thing that impresses me about them: no matter where you go, you'll never find a Tongva toxic waste dump. They're sustainable. Yarar Gomokre, Tatongvatam. So let's see. So this is interesting. Thank you, Shoen, for bringing up the Father's Day. We're also connected with Mother's Day from last weekend. And what comes up for me is a line from our 7th Zen Bodhisattva precept. And part of it says, I will give my best effort and accept the results. And that line comes up for me every day when I'm working with students, every day when I'm living my own life. I will give my best effort and accept the results. So I like to make that maybe the main point of today, and maybe have some little tools to offer that can help. I'm seeing this as mindful parenting. So we parent our children, we parent ourselves, and we parent each other. Now, if you're a parent, you know certain things. Like, for instance, your children are your most exacting Zen teachers. Uncompromising. Your so-called Zen teacher that you go see in the Zendo, they're willing to work with you and they want to help you along. But your children are the real teachers. You better get your stuff together. They will help you achieve liberation from all vestiges of dignity. There's the things that you think you're not going to put up with in life, and you find yourself putting up with all kinds of stuff. Freedom, that's what freedom is. They will bring you down to earth and help you connect with reality in ways you never dreamed of. You never imagine it. So this is a special thank you and admiration going out to all the parents out here. I have one son, he's 23 and working at a good job now. I don't know if you heard the new scary phrase for parents, failure to launch. That's one of the phrases. We do what we can. We give our best effort. And what I like about that line, I will give my best effort. We give it away, not just for the kids, but for everything that we do. Give your best effort with no string attached, 100%. And accept the results, fully accepting. From my memory of Roshi Ryodo, a great line from him. He said, we have to accept this present moment. But that doesn't mean we have to accept the next one. Right now, I accept. And then, what can I do? Because the next moment is not made yet. So that's the point. And then I have a couple of things to throw out there to help out. I'd like this to be interactive rather than just talking at you. I like to make this kind of thing living. This is a circle, so let's make it a circle and have everybody get involved. But there's one thing I would like to bring up from Dogen Zenji, who just about everybody in our school is a fan of Dogen. In his directions to the cook, the Tenzo Kyokun, he mentions developing 3 minds: joyful mind, magnanimous mind, and parental mind, or Roshin, which is also elder mind. One passage from T. Griffith Folk's translation, Dogen says, so-called elder's mind is the spirit of fathers and mothers. It is, for example, like a father and mother who dote on an only child. One's thoughts of the 3 jewels are like their concentration on that one child. Even if they are poor or desperate, they strongly love and nurture that single child. People who are outsiders cannot understand what their state of mind is like. They can only understand it when they themselves become fathers or mothers. I don't think Dogen was a father. We don't know. It's interesting that he would say that. Without regard for their own poverty or wealth, parents earnestly turn their thoughts toward raising their child. Without regard for whether they themselves are cold or hot, they shade the child or cover the child. We may regard this as affectionate thinking at its most intense. A person who arouses this spirit is fully conscious of it. A person who cultivates this spirit is one who truly awakens to it. Therefore, when the cook watches over water and watches over grain, in every case, they should sustain the caring and warmth of child rearing. This is, I will give my best effort in every case. So in general, in our Zen life, our Zen way of living, 100% effort with everything you do, 100% attention. Dogen said, treat each grain of rice as your eye pupil. Now, you know how careful you are with your eyes. What if you treated everything in your life that carefully? You're that 100% involved. So this extends to everything we do, not just the kitchen, not with our kids. How can we go about cultivating this kind of understanding and realization? So in my work, I've been doing a Zen style of mindfulness. And Showan mentioned my Zen mindfulness cloud book. I had written a book, and then I decided just to put it up on the web. And along with being a musician, I was also a programmer for 30 years. So I said, well, I'll just use what I can do. So I made a kind of, I call it a cloud book. It's kind of a combination between a website and like an online book format. If you Google it, you can find it. So I put the method for my Zen mindfulness there, as well as essays on Zen in general and mindfulness in general. And I usually present this method in workshops of between 3 and 6 hours. So there's a lot of stuff, but there are a few little points that I thought I could bring up and throw them out there, and maybe you could use them. The basic approach to this, and again, this is an upaya, a skillful means, is a tool. One thing I've noticed is that everything in Buddhism is a tool. There's no magic other than the ordinary magic of waking up in this marvelous living moment that we're in. But then what can we do with it? They're all tools, really useful tools. But none of them is like the truth. Each one is kind of a way to kind of point us toward the truth. And this is just a different way. And the basis of this way is to treat our mind states as like physical realms that we visit. So if you want to go to Europe, you'll get a map. And when you go from country to country, you say, gee, what country am I in? So you look on the map and say, oh, here's a big cathedral here. That must be the one here. So I'm in Chartres in France. So that's kind of the idea behind my Zen mindfulness, is we see the different mind states that we go through, learn to recognize them, and then be able to consciously go through them rather than being driven, as we often are, fears and opinions and assumptions. And why am I all angry right now? Where did that come from? Why am I peaceful right now? Where did that come from? So if we can set up some landmarks and learn to recognize where we are in each one, then we can be more aware of it, be skillful. So this is interesting. I call it Zen mindfulness, and there's the mindfulness movement. It's all the rage. We don't talk about it in Zen until recently, even though Zen itself is just redolent with mindfulness practices all day long. You're paying attention to what you're doing. Showan earlier was talking about cleaning the incense bowl in the Zendo. You're really paying attention to it. If you don't pay attention, you're going to mess up. You drop it and all the dust is all over the floor. So the whole day is filled with things to keep you right here. Keep coming back, keep coming back. And that to me is what mindfulness is. Just wake up now. And now what do we do with it? So we have these realms. And what I like to do is start where we spend most of our time. Often, if you're doing something Zen, we begin with a period of silence to kind of settle. Well, this workshop is different. We start in the busyness. We start in the tape loops. We start where we're talking about things that we like and things we don't like. I call that realm Storyland. And that's the easiest one to recognize. Maybe the most important. So Storyland is the place that you are when you're angry, when you're melancholy about something that happened, or you're fearful about something that's going to happen in the future, things that you've done before, things that you've seen before, you've thought about before, is kind of, we call them tape loops. Maybe that is meaningful for you. You know, I'm thinking about the person I work with and how what they do bugs me. And this is the 99th time I've been thinking through that. That's Storyland. So what about the characteristics of this Storyland? What I like to do is set up images and little reminders to remember, well, what is it that makes this particular realm itself? So Storyland is subjective. It's all values and judgments. They're all floating around in Storyland. Memories, what we're aware of are opinions. It's emotional. We're floating around on our feelings. These are aroused by our evaluations of things. It's irrational. You know, if you see someone walking down the street and they're involved in Storyland, you can tell that they're the kind of eyes are glazed over and they're off in Storyland. The one thing I want to mention, none of these realms is good or bad in relation to the other ones. Good and bad are the things we find when we're in Storyland. There's nothing wrong with Storyland itself. It's just a natural part of who we are. So how about an image for that? So an easy to remember image of Storyland is what comes up for me is sitting in a coffee shop. So it's maybe the lights are low, there's nice jazz music going on in the background, you're talking with your friend, there's the aromas of the coffees around you, and you're not really aware of the room around you. There's some kind of vague colors out there. And the music is you're kind of floating on it, and you're floating on your emotions as you're talking to your friend about stuff. So this is Storyland. Nothing wrong with it, unless we get stuck there. So this is interactive. So at any time, you know, please put up your hand if you have a question or a comment. And what I want to do is get everybody to have facility and to be able to use these tools. So I start with Storyland because usually that's the easiest one to get. So does anybody have any questions about Storyland? Is it perfectly clear? Arthur.
Is Storyland Endless?
Storyland is pretty much infinite and it has layers. But and it is endless. Actually, all of these are endless. When your life ends, then Storyland will end. But what is the end of life? I don't know. I haven't gotten there yet. Great question, though. What does that mean for you?
I guess what it means for me is that when I feel like I'm in Storyland, I have this agency that I perceive, that I can keep making the story go further and further and further. And actually, I become very frustrated personally when I can't make the story go any further. I almost feel useless, or I don't know. That generates certain feelings when the stories end, and when I can't push it further, even though I'm not sure whether this agency is. I'm not sure about it. You know.
Oh, that's interesting. So that gets to a maybe a little bit different realm that we'll hit in a few minutes, because we're going to do kind of like a whirlwind tour. Like if this is Tuesday, it must be Belgium. You know, kind of whirlwind tour through this cycle of mindfulness, as they call it. So we'll keep that in mind. Thank you. Storyland itself is basically static. It's replaying stuff. So you're talking about a little bit different realm, and we'll get there. That's a really important one. Okay, so now we're in Storyland, and well, what are we going to do about it? What if we want to go somewhere else? So back in the 80s, I had a job at a print shop, and we used overlays to make things like business cards, clear pieces of plastic, and you would have your basic graphic on the bottom, do an overlay, and put some person's name on there, pull that back, put an overlay on it, put another person's name, and then you take a picture of it, put it on the press, and print. So I took that idea of an overlay. What about taking the stuff that makes Storyland? Imagine that's all on an overlay. That's the colors, that's the emotions, that's the value judgments. Put those on an overlay, and now peel it back. And what do you find underneath that? So we peel that back, it's like taking a backward step. Those Dogen fans here, have heard about the backward step from the Fukan Zazengi. So I'm going to step back from Storyland, and which is the subjective realm. If we peel that step back, now we find ourselves in an objective realm. I call this orientation. And here in orientation, what we have, the main landmarks are labels, measurements, distances, boundaries. So for instance, this is a mouse. In Storyland, this might be that mouse that always messes up and I really hate it. In orientation, this is just a mouse. And it appears to have a little bit of a glitchy connection to the computer. You see the difference? And this mouse is now 2 feet away from me. The temperature is about 72 degrees. When I'm in Storyland, it's getting a little warm in here. I don't know, kind of uncomfortable. If I peel that back, that's subjectivity, and now I'm in orientation, it is 72 degrees. There are beads of sweat beginning to appear on the side of my face. So you're getting the flavor of this orientation now. It's strictly labels, no values, no judgments, no connections between things, just everything is just exactly as it is. Purely objective. So my image for this is a laboratory. So I imagine you go to the laboratory and the fluorescent lights are on. Everything is clear, sharp. You want to be making clear, efficient measurements. You want to be putting the exact levels of whatever it is you're putting together in the laboratory, and you want to be documenting. Now you want to be documenting is maybe a judgment, a value judgment. But the idea is here, we're just clear and sharp. So when you're in Storyland, what you can do is step back from that, and suddenly your whole room comes into clear focus. Here I am. People say, oh, I'm coming back to myself. People will say, oh, I left, but now I'm back. You know that. Here I am. And the time is 9:28. It's not early, it's not late. It's 9:28. So this is a second mind realm that we can find ourselves in. It's not better or worse than any of the other ones, just different. And very useful. So we take a step back into orientation, and it feels like a click. My first teacher was Joko Beck, and she said, coming where it's kind of like, back then we had records. Well, records are coming back into vogue, right? LPs. So you put your needle on it and it goes, and then it clicks into the groove. So that's what orientation is like. And you'll have your own way of feeling it, but what I'd like you to do is just kind of find that border between these two places, Storyland, orientation. Get to feel that border and learn to do it at will. So at any time you want to say, oh, now I'm going to click into orientation. Really useful tool. And again, this isn't like the truth. If you go looking for orientation, you're not going to find it. It's just a way of looking at our world. It itself is kind of a projection, but we're coming to that. So I have a practice for these realms too. And for staying in orientation, the practice is labeling. And this is a great practice. Spend some time when you're sitting, 5 or 10 minutes, maybe at the beginning of your sitting. You may have been told the best thing to do when you begin sitting Zazen is always do 5 minutes of counting your breath. This is from Koryo Roshi, who's one of Maizumi Roshi's teachers. He said, every time you sit, no matter what, spend 5 minutes counting your breath. That's a labeling practice. That's a way of just bringing us into orientation. Now, once you're settled here with the breath, spend some time labeling every one of your perceptions, no matter what it is. I thought about labeling my perceptions. Sensation of pain in my knee, a bird singing outside, a car driving by, itchy head, feeling of sadness about my mother passing on this date 6 years ago. Whatever it is, accept this, fully accept whatever the perception is, give it a clear objective label, then let it go. You notice something like this in just about every tradition of meditation or religion, spiritual tradition. Somewhere in it, there's a way for us to let go of our stories, some technique. And this is my way of clarifying that. So do this, especially when you're sitting and you know how it is when you're meditating and the monkey mind happens. You're trying to control the mind and trying to be clear, and the mind is not cooperating. Like the monkeys in a tree, all screaming at each other. You try to stop them and nothing you do makes them stop. So I recommend just labeling it. Monkey mind, let it go. Monkey mind, let it go. Car going by. Monkey mind, let it go. And eventually, you start getting supple. The more you do this, the better you get at it. We're not suppressing anything. We're not grabbing on to anything. We're not ignoring anything. We're simply completely accepting each perception as it goes through. And what I'm perceiving, I'm continuing to see Arthur on here. Is Arthur pinned as the speaker, or no? Okay.
Should not be. You can hit your gallery view, Roshi, and
Oh, gallery view, that might be better. That's a good
yeah,
point.
yeah.
I should do that because suddenly it was one speaker view. Okay. So this is just a way to practice staying here in this clear moment. Again, it's not better or worse than the other states of mind. Well, so here's a good question for you now. If I'm thinking, boy, I like this orientation better than Storyland, which realm am I in? Anybody?
Storyland.
Storyland. So one thing we do in the workshops is we do little drill experiments or exercises, and we try to fool each other to see where we are, and we learn to really pinpoint where we are at any time. So anytime you're liking something or preferring something, that's Storyland. Orientation is just this. Now, one of our students was from Switzerland, and she was saying, "But this sounds unhuman." And it's really interesting. So maybe we expect people to be constantly emotional. Well, sometimes we are, but we're not always. And it's interesting because she's a nurse. And when you're a nurse, you know, when someone comes in with bleeding, you don't go, "Oh my God, look at all the blood, it's horrible." That's not going to be helpful. You say, "Oh, okay, come over here and I'm going to clean this for you and just settle down, and I'm going to put this wrap around you. That's going to be nice." You have to go right into orientation and then a little bit farther if you're going to be helpful. So that's a quick run through orientation. Any questions about this one? The images or the practice labeling? Alexander? No question or just nodding?
Yes.
I have a little question. Hello. Well, actually, I have lots of connection more than question. The connection started with when you were talking about the map and the territory. And this, it seems to me like a kind of a metaphor that can be stretched to the entire process. If we consider, there is, I think it was a philosopher, an engineer that said that the map is not the territory. And I've been always reflecting on the fact and the absurdity of saying that the map is not the territory, because the map is indeed the territory. And I've been thinking in terms of, if you take this orientation part, and if you take the part of the storytelling, Storyland, I've been thinking, so we humans are animals and we are social meaning making animals. So we live through our stories, and we are the stories that we tell to each other
And to ourselves.
and to ourselves. Yes. And so we were thinking, Alexander and I, on this topic of the stories, and on the what you said on the orientation and on this static. So this kind of taking the perspective, which is our objective perspective, and you sit basically like in the theater as the, you know, the observer of the performance of the show, of the story, right? So how this process, so I try to kind of for myself to reframe it as so you said basically you have perception, right? So we are sensory beings, so we feel something, and this what we feel, that's of course connected to our perception, so the sensorial and the perceptual part. Then we accept what is there, so the perception. Then you give a label to it. And I was asking myself, isn't it so that sometimes the labels appear before the perception is starting? So is there a connection there? Because as Wittgenstein said, the language is the limit of our reality, right? So that's the way we then frame it, then create a boundaries. So this is the reflection on the process, and I would like to understand or to feel, how is it possible, since we are like sensorial perceptual being immersed in a absolutely sense-making reality where we try to make sense all the time, how can you take the objective part and be static there? So that's, I found it very fascinating, this point. Yeah, and then I had a little thought on the talk. Yes,
before you go to the next one?
Yeah.
Yes. So I would like to add just a slightly different question to this, which will be: is the story? So in building into what Ilaria said before, is the story real? So can the story be static? So is it possible to have a story that whatever impulse is coming in touch with this story, so every moment you are the story, something is still touching the story, and will it change the story, or would it really be able to leave the story untouched?
So both of those questions are really interconnected.
Yes.
And
yes,
we're going to see the resolution of those questions as we go, because what we're doing right now is looking at static names for specific countries or maybe specific places in your house. But when you live your life, you don't just spend your whole day or your whole life in one room. You know, people will stay the whole life in one city, but you know, these metaphors only go so far. It's not static. We can say there is, like, say, a tape loop. I remember I had one tape loop I used to play about one of my fellow programmers, and I'd do the same story over and over and over. So in a sense, that's static, but on the other hand, every moment is brand new that we're in. And this tool is meant to work with that. And eventually we're going to use these in a cycle. So, but the first step is just to see, well, what are the individual parts of that cycle? And once we can learn to situate ourselves on it, then we'll know, oh, here I am, I'm here, and I should be moving ahead. And the rest of this method is about seeing, well, where will we move to? And Ilaria's question about our identity and static and the boundaries. I'm about to get to the next one, which I think might clarify that for you a little bit. So let's move on to that. We have our first overlay was value judgments and stories and narratives. So we pulled that overlay away, and underneath it, like that was the subjective overlay. Underneath that, we have the objective realm. I call that orientation. This is the boundaries. And on this overlay, we have little squares and circles separating places and things. So now look at that as this is now an overlay. All your labels, all your names, all the things that we've named and we've measured, put them all on that overlay. Now peel that back. And what's underneath that? I had a PowerPoint of this. It would take too long to find it. But the idea is all these, we projected all the value judgments, all the stories ourselves. We made it. You're talking about Wittgenstein. So we make this. This is what I made. And I know this because looking at the exact same things, you have different stories about it. Same thing, different story that you have, different story that I have. Peel that back and we get closer to each other. We're going to say that this is a computer. This is a book. Now in Japan, someone would say hon desu. In France, c'est un livre. Different words, same thing, right? So you call it something different from me. That means that this is another thing that's individual to each of us. So what we're now going to do is take all those names, put them on an overlay, peel that back. And now what's underneath is exactly the same for everyone. This place I call presence. And when you peel everything off, everyone is going to see the same thing. All the great mystics say the same thing, ultimately, but with their own words, right? How do you get to that place that you can't name? So find this, but if there's something that you can name, you know you're not there anymore. You may just be there for a moment, but you feel that it's this infinite potential. And the boundary between the realm of orientation and this realm of presence, what I call it. For me, when you step back into it, it's more like a wave kind of washing everything off of you. Everything is now washed off. In my yoga classes, 2 or 3 times during the class, my teacher used to say, okay, everybody, big sigh. Okay, so let's do it. Let out a big sigh. 2/3 of the way through that sigh, you were there. You'd let everything go. No names, no boundaries, no stories. And then you come back. But for a moment there, you were in what I call presence. And in my overlays, basically, I have an overlay system. I picture the people, and it starts off with what we think about them. Take away the overlay of value judgments, and then we just have their names and their clear outlines. Take away orientation, it's just a big blotch of color. That's all. It's really hard to represent visually. But the idea is when you pull away all of your own overlays, everything that you have projected on reality, you get what I call presence. Roshi Ryodo used to talk about this. You say, what I'm talking about is this very moment before I have added anything to it. It's an instant, this cutting edge instant. It's like dancing on the edge of a razor, staying in this living moment before we add anything to it. So we have this ability now to put everything of Storyland onto an overlay, peel that back, knowing there's nothing wrong with it, nothing wrong with Storyland. It's just one of our mind realms. All our stories and narratives, put that away. Now we're in this clear moment, measuring things, seeing what's here. There's still an overlay, there's still a hangover of Storyland, but that's okay. Then when we peel this back, now it's infinite, the empty infinite, but not a void. It's not blank. It's infinite potential. Now, of course, when I call it infinite potential, am I there anymore? No, I'm not there anymore. That's okay. This is okay, my image for this is the stage before the play begins. So you have a stage in the theater, and that stage will allow a well-written comedy. It allows bad acting. It allows a movie if you have a movie on it. It allows musicians to come on and play. The stage presents everything with no discrimination at all. That's what this clear moment is. Everything happens in this moment, doesn't it? Atomic bombs go off in this moment. People getting together in a marvelous relationship happens in this moment. Sitting in meditation in this moment. This is why in the Soto school we say, this is Buddha sitting zazen. When you sit zazen, that is Buddha. This is the only place there is. And you're opening up, whether you know it or not, opening up to what we call Buddha nature. So what about this empty infinite? When I do my workshops, I found a really happy accident. I had one of those stand-up flip charts, and it had a big piece of paper, and it's on this stand. And I was writing, we were writing down what we had to say about Storyland, and that took the top half of it. And then we were writing down what we said about orientation. That took the second half of it. And below it, well, there's this empty space below the piece of paper in the stand. Perfect for presence. That's what presence is. It allows everything. You can't write on it. It's like, going down to the Pacific Ocean. I take my Sharpie pen and I said, well, I'm going to write the name of the ocean on the ocean. So Ilaria was talking about the map. That's right. In one way, the map is the place because the placeness is all in my head. On the other hand, no, the map isn't the place at all. When I was little, we lived in New York. I was going up to Canada. I said, well, where's the line on the ground like the map had? It's not there, right? But in a functional sense, the map is the place because you go there, and if you go to France, you figure, well, I can speak French to these people. You don't look at the map and you go to France and say, okay, I better start speaking Mandarin. It's not going to work. So you see, all of these realms are needed. We need them all. We need that map. And we need to be able to see that the map is not the whole thing. In Zen, one of our sutras that we chant every day is the identity of relative and absolute. So this presence that you just experienced is what we call the absolute. And the maps and the stories, that's what we call the relative. So now we get into presence. This is a place. There's nothing underneath that. Presence is not an overlay. That's like the universe. Actually, all space and time. There's a new theory of a way of looking at space and time is kind of like a loaf of bread, and you slice it. And these are time slices. So the universe isn't just one snapshot. It's all of its time, from the Big Bang to whatever comes next. The whole thing is all, and for us, it's virtually infinite. Who knows what's outside of it? I love speculating. Multiverses is really cool stuff. But as far as our life here and dealing with dukkha, so you may have heard that Buddha really only taught two things: the fact of dukkha, of suffering, and the end of dukkha. Now, here's a nice little piece. This phrase, I've never been happy with our English translations of dukkha. It's translated as, pain, suffering, stress. So one of our current Chuso at CCLA is from Nepal. And the word dukkha is part of his native language. And he was saying, when I was growing up, like he had several siblings, and when they were teenagers, they were, causing problems. Here we are back to Parents' Day and Father's Day. And his mother used to complain to like his siblings, and she'd say, "You give me dukkha." So what is this dukkha? I asked him, how do you translate that? And he came up with I think the closest translation I've ever heard. Not going my way. That's what dukkha is. Friction. Yeah. Excellent. So literally the word comes from a wheel on a wagon that has a bad center spoke or spinner hole. So you're going in this wheel, and what is the wagon? It goes badunk, badunk, badunk. Friction. Between what now? See, that's the key. So not going my way. So if you look at it like, say, this is the way I want things to be. This is the way things really are. Oops, they don't match. Not going my way. So what if I can force the world to go just the way I want it to be? It's going to be like that for a few moments, isn't it? And then it's going to start changing. I'm not getting my way anymore. Force things to go my way, and then the world is just so huge that's going to change again. So we can conflict with contact. Yeah. So you're bringing up doctrine of dependent origination. Where does the dukkha come from? Buddha lays out a 12-step process, really clear, of how we start with presence and then end up with dukkha. So one way to look at this, there's my way and there's the way, and they don't match. In Zen, what we do, we don't try to force the way to be my way. You see, there's friction, there's dissonance. They're not the same. That's the dukkha. So what can we do? How about that? Now there is just the way. There is no friction. There's no dissonance. No matter which way you look at it, there is the way. When I have my way, oops, now they're different. Friction. Set aside my way, and now the friction isn't there. The dissonance isn't there. And I've noticed that you find this principle also in every spiritual tradition. If you're evangelical Christian, you live your life for Jesus. You don't live your life for yourself, for Jesus. I can't remember his name, but there's the Sufi sage who said, burn yourself up in God till there's nothing left but ashes. Nay, not even ashes. What are we doing? We're setting our little self aside for something else. In Buddhism, there's Jodo Shinshu, other styles with Amida Buddha, and emphasize Tariki, other power. I give my life. Amida Buddha does it. Same thing again, taking my little self, setting it to the side, and allowing, well, whatever we call it, to be the way. In Zen, we have Jobiki, samadhi power. That lets us set ourselves aside. And then there's just the way. And our particular way of doing it is looking at it to see, well, what is it that separates us from that? We look into it. So you've heard the word delusion. We look at what our delusion is. It is our delusion that makes us think that we do have a way. We look through the illusion of that. We see there actually isn't a self. That's like every person say, we call this kensho. You see through the illusion of a self. And then you say, oh, it's all this is all me. Or there is no me, there's just all of this. Basically what we're doing is seeing presence, that there is no separation at all. It's not like myself has died. We talk about Daikensho being the great death. Something dies, but not like because we had to kill it. And we're just seeing that it's just simply a different realm in our integrated self, because your integrated self contains all of these realms. So now we get to Zen peacemakers. So I hope you've all thoroughly dug into the 3 tenets. So not knowing, bearing witness, and I call the last one selfless action. We're constantly changing the name of that. In presence, that is the place that you do not knowing. And in the 3 tenets, when you take action, you always begin with not knowing. You have to begin there. So these steps back are a way of connecting to the 3 tenets. And then you move on, and you notice that other ones, there you'll find a realm for each one of them. So we're here in presence. The characteristics of presence, no past or future. Just the crackling of life on this cutting edge of this very moment. Flowing, nothing static. Constant change in all of our senses. So just watch what you're hearing. Is it exactly the same forever? If you're in a sound test room, it may seem like it. Okay, here's A going at A440. Beep. It seems static, but no, it's not. If you look at that sound on an oscilloscope, it's going like this. Have a nice sine wave, 440 times a second. Peaceful. No boundaries separating things, no contention for space. There's no friction because there's no things identified to be having friction. So if I can say, I'm holding up my two hands now, what realm am I in? It's the second one. Orientation, objective, holding up two hands. If I'm saying, boy, it's really getting hot in here now, what realm am I in? First one, Storyland. You see, so these, you notice these realms, they're not the truth, but they're just useful. And when I'm getting all angry, you mentioned about, is it endless? Yeah, the story on top of this, the story you have gives you more feelings, which then start off another story, which bring more feelings. That is overlaying. And you may have noticed that anger is usually built on fear. You peel back anger, you get some kind of fear. Fear of friction, fear of loss, fear of gain of something you don't want. And then you can dig underneath there. So it's a huge thing right within that one realm. But you can take all of that. This is one of the things we learn to do in meditation. Put it all in a big bag. And it's kind of like a emotional knapsack. Like you're carrying a big heavy knapsack when you go hiking, and you've been hiking for a few hours. Now it's time to have lunch. So you take your knapsack off, backpack, and you set it down. Oh, what a relief that is. And it's all your cooking stuff, all your food, everything in there. Now you can set it down and have some water or something and relax. That's what we do when we step back from Storyland. Don't worry, everything will be there when you want to pick it up again. That emotional backpack still there. Arthur.
Yeah, I'm definitely entrenched in what you were talking about, and about these realms and everything. And I just and I really appreciate your repetition. I feel like repetition is really important and often overlooked, because we think like, oh well, why didn't you understand it the first time or whatever? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, that's because my brain doesn't work that way. I can't input it into one cell and be done. And I guess I wanted to play a scenario for you. I don't want my mom to die, and that's a judgment. My mother is dying. And so what is underneath there? And how do I?
So
Yeah.
we'll get there. We're still statically looking at these realms, and cognizant
As
of our
like
time.
independent realms?
Yeah, as independent. But once we put all the pieces together, then we can start going through. And so hang on to that question, okay? That'll be good, important. And there's another one that you had from before that we're also hanging on to. There's a question, Larry and Alexander.
I wanted actually to add on what you said on this anger. That can be, so if you peel off anger, that you always so often see fear, and you name different fears. And I just like to add one that's a little bit sounds absurd in the first place, is the fear of relativity, which means that you can even fear loss relative to so you're in reality you're gaining, but you're losing out compared to something else or to someone else. And then you fear this loss, even if it's a gain. So it's this fear of relativity, of change in relation to your story in the end.
Yeah, that's your identity, huh? And so you bring up something that I think that I noticed. You may have noticed when you're sitting along a meditation retreat. I've noticed this myself, noticed in my students. You kind of get to there's a cliff. And I say, I don't want to go off that cliff. I'm going to lose me. This is a real fear that comes. So you go, oh, nope, I'm going to back off. Get close to it. No, I don't go off. Because if you leap off that cliff, there's full enlightenment is there. But I don't want to do it. You're right? Is that what you're talking about? Because I'm going to lose me. And then I just noticed this maybe 6-7 months ago. In all my workshops, I've given workshops at Zen Center, continuing education for therapists, a great group I gave it at the Corona Women's Prison. In all of these, when we finally got to presence and we're spending time with the exercises in the group, no one ever felt any fear. And I thought that's because I purposely set these as steps. So I call this 3-step Zen. And one of the, like when I can do the extended workshop, I say, well, this is kind of like you want to cross a little river, but you can't cross the whole thing in one leap. So what do? You find a place where there's some rocks. You take one step at a time, and then you take another step. Then another step, final step gets you across the river. But that leap to full enlightenment, unless you work out for 10 years and you're finally strong enough, now you can leap that thing, you can do it. Or you can take steps. So this first step back into orientation seems to be the key. Because fear, of all the realms that we've looked at, where would you find fear? The Storyland is really, you feel it. So the ability to say, accept it completely, I give my best effort, I'll accept the results. Storyland is where we don't accept things. Storyland is where I'm really feeling fear. And it's okay to put all of that into a bag, set it aside, and just kind of orient yourself in this moment, come back to yourself in this clear moment. In orientation, there's no fear. It's just objects. Now, of course, in practice, as I said, there's still some hangover, a little bit of this stuff, and that's fine. But most of the fear is gone. And then when it comes time to let all the boundaries wash off, the boundary between me and not me goes with it. But that's okay, because this is our another natural part of ourselves where we're simply open in this moment. Nothing nailed down, no need for anything to be nailed down. Those of you who've done Soto Zen services, chant the Heart Sutra. In emptiness, there is no form, sensation, conception, discrimination, awareness. Not that they've been destroyed. It's simply that we haven't created them yet. We create them. And if you look at the 12 steps of dependent origination, you can see how they're created, beginning with ignorance. The first thing of ignorance is that there's a me. I'm a separate me from everything else. When you're sitting in meditation, where's me? It's not here. It's just open. Me is literally everything. But if me is everything, can you point to anything that is me? No. So, well, there's no me. There's no not me. It's not even a question. So that's what this presence is about. So this intermediate step of being calm, just labeling things. This is what I consider me. This is what I consider not me. This is mine. That is not. All those are labels that you project on the map. So then when you lift that off, oh, what's here? for some reason, the fear isn't there anymore. Or you don't even lift it off, you just let it wash off. And you find yourself on that clear stage. You are the stage. But even that, you see, even that's not there anymore. That's adding to it. So what we're learning to do is to let it all go. 2/3 the way through that sigh, you're there. Like the finger pointing to yourself. Exactly. How can a finger point to itself? There's no word, you add any words and concepts to it, you're separate. And that's not it. So you take that to your Zen teacher and then the bell rings. But if you actually live the response, say, oh, good, I'm glad you see that now. So presence is when we've let it all go. And you try to look for a boundary and you're not there anymore. There's no natural boundaries. Now, in this ever-changing, it's not static, ever-changing things. Yeah, there's going to be something that I'm going to want to indicate as my microphone. I'm going to talk in that direction instead of over there. That's very useful. But in our perceptions, where we're seeing, since again, the point of all this is the end of dukkha. And here's the way, and here's my way. That's made of Storyland and Orientation. Take Storyland away, most of it's gone. Take Orientation away, everything's gone. And there's just the way as it is. So now here we are in presence. What can we do? Well, we can't go back any farther. There's nowhere else to go. So what we can do now is take a step forward, again into the objective layer, but now it's different. Orientation, last time we were there, we were in orientation, and we're labeling things to kind of let Storyland go away. But now we're coming from a new direction, coming from completely clean slate, not knowing. So now we step forward, and I call this new realm discovery, because everything is brand new. Now here's this microphone. Here's my mouse, and it's a different position. I can say my mouse, but I'm really seeing with clean new eyes, like rebooting your computer. You know, if you've let your computer run too long, it gets kind of slow. The memory's been fragmented. It's kind of yucky. So you reboot. Everything is nice and fresh and goes clean and clear. Discovery. And this is the realm where we do bearing witness. Now, you may have noticed with bearing witness, you're taught to accept everyone's view. So for instance, you go to Auschwitz and you bear witness to the victims. You bear witness to the guards. You bear witness to the farmers that were around there. You bear witness to the Russian soldiers coming. Without judgment, seeing everybody's view. So this again, why? Because this is the objective realm. Here we're only concerned with individual things and really seeing each individual thing for itself. I call this discovery. It's also, so bearing witness, originally 3 peacemaker tenets, to me, they had to do with big things like world things. But look at the fundamental principles. You can apply them to anything, any decision you make. How about deciding what you want to have for breakfast? Well, start with not knowing, look at what's available. What are the ingredients? Roshi Ryodo also had instructions for the cook with his book. And he talks about when you make a soup, one way to do it is say, okay, I'm going to make a really great mushroom soup. So you go in the refrigerator, oops, no mushrooms. Oh, this is terrible. What can I do? You're stuck. So the way and my way don't match. Dissonance. His way is, well, just look and see what's there. Well, what do we got? So we got some leeks, and I got some, I could put this kale in there at the end. That'd be nice. How about these beans? Here's some nice pasta, like a pasta fagioli. So I'll work with what I have, gather the ingredients, put them together. Now, so you see what we're doing now. We're in the objective realm, but we come from a different direction. So it doesn't feel the same as orientation. Orientation, we're backing away from Storyland. Now we're stepping forward. Leaning into it is the new phrase. But we're still just seeing what's here. Everything's brand new. Treat it as brand new, because it is. Even if it looks like the same box of pasta that was there yesterday, everything is new now. And then what happens? So just kind of naturally, when you put all the ingredients together, you start seeing relationships between all these ingredients, right? Oh, this would go with that. This would go with that. These capers, I'm not sure. So I put those aside, and a soup comes together. So what happened? Naturally, we took action. We stepped forward into a third realm. This is a subjective realm. I would like the soup with these leeks, but not with those capers. I'm making choices, subjective choices. Someone else would make something different out of it. So this is taking action. This is the third tenet. So you can look at this. I call this place resolution because it comes into focus. I talked to Roshi Ryodo about that. He didn't like the word resolution. He thinks that he was seeing it as like something got static, that got shut down, even though it's not. It's just the way place you're going through. When you take action, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do that. So I see resolution as being like the picture comes into focus now. So now you take action. I will give my best effort. This is where we give our best effort. 100%, no matter what it is. If you're making soup, if you're setting up the next bearing witness retreat, you give your best effort to 100%. I think, Sean, you might remember Ani Singer, Rabbi Singer. What I got from him was, you notice that he was 100% in anything he did. He used to do the high holy days at Zen Center, and 100%, maybe 110%. He was fully into whatever he was doing. I just love that. Leaping into his action. How can I take my story ahead? Arthur had said that. This is where we get creative. You know, my first iteration of this, I just had the three realms. And someone said, well, gee, well, that means I can't be creative, right? I said, yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. So no, we can use the subjective realm. That's our design studio. Like if you're an artist or a musician, that's where you want to be, right on the edge, creating, having come from presence. So that's why the three tenets is so important. They begin with not knowing. Clear slate, allow everything in. Then you step forward. Discovery is where I am fully accepting of this present moment. But I don't have to accept the next one, because the next one I'm about to create. Step forward into taking action, step forward into resolution, and put that soup together, cook it. And then you present it. So now we have something, the final piece. So what if you put the soup together and your friends came over and everybody liked it, start saying, hey, I did pretty good. Yeah, I did a good job with that soup. Pat myself on the back. Yep, I'm back in Storyland. So what happens is we just kind of while we're digesting what we've done, we end up being a Storyland. And Storyland is really important for that. This is where we learn. Now learn for the last time. So this is where I'm me. I'm actually an individual. I'm myself. And I can see that my narratives about myself are changing. And that's okay. So I'm now going to see who I am this time. But what happens if we get stuck there? Fear and anger and dukkha start happening. Okay, so now we know all these places. I'm going to share a screen. So this is what I call the mindfulness cycle. We always begin in Storyland, step back into orientation, step back into presence. Now you see the blue of presence goes all the way around the whole thing. It's the background for everything that happens. This fundamental mind ground, we say in Zen. Mu, our face before our parents were born. But we don't stay there in any of them. We step forward into discovery. What's new now? Step forward into resolution, take our action. That turns into Storyland, where we're going to digest everything we've just seen. And then immediately we step back. Myoshin, raise your hand. Yes.
I can't wait till you're finished with that.
Excuse me?
I can't wait till you're finished with the.
Okay, okay. So the idea now is we use these for a cycle. And this cycle might take a moment to go through. It might take a while to go through. And you can use this, like for instance, what if you have an important decision to make? Consciously go through this. As you step forward to discovery, you look at all the salient points. What's really important about this decision? What are the pros? What are the cons? Now, do I see a resolution of this? No, not yet. Go back again. Clean the slate, stay in presence, step forward. Now the ingredients will look different next time you see them. Is the resolution clear? Nope. Step back. Step forward. Resolution clear. You know, I'm really going to do this. You know, this is a process, if you've done, there's a process called Socratic, sociocratic method for coming to decisions in groups. You notice that this works. This is how we do in that too. This same process happens. And we, at Zen Center, we use that for electing stewards of circles. We do it for coming to decisions. I use it actually on 2 court cases I was on. And it was really helpful for the jury. But so this cycle. Now, what happens if we don't use this? So here's what I like to call the Deluded Pyramid. This is where most people spend their time. Big amount in Storyland, little tiny amount in discovery. What do? You step forward, you take a snapshot of the world. Oh yeah, all the conspiracy theorists, they're still off on that. Yep, go right back into Storyland, chug away, grinding my axe. Take a snapshot forward. Oh, wait a minute, there's a truck. I better jump back, get out of the way. Now I'm back in my stories again, right? So you see the levels, the strata of, we're basically seeing, we're not seeing presence at all because we kind of bypass that. Most of the time in Storyland. So you see how this is an upside down pyramid that is very unstable. But after doing the cycle, if you really work at it, you start ending up with what I call the Enlightened Pyramid. You spend more of your time in presence. This is our original home, we call it in Zen. Once in a while, you step forward into discovery, resolution, and there's a tiny bit of Storyland there as you return to presence. All day long, you can do this. Just being open to this clear living moment. Step forward, what needs to be done now? Nothing? Okay, return to presence. Step forward, what needs to be done now? Oh, the light just turned green. So I'll step on the gas and I'll go ahead in the car. So this is just kind of something that happens if you use this cycle. Once again, just a tool that is really useful at certain times. So let me stop that. And let's get back to Myoshin. What was your question?
Yes, it what you're saying really sounds great theoretically and metaphorically, but to put in a real life situation, I'd
Yeah.
really like to hear. For example, I lost my mother last year, and while I was taking care of her a year and a half prior to that, I'm thinking, how would it have looked differently had I applied this, or when I was taking care of my son who was suffering from mental illness for a while? How helpful would it have been had I applied this, method or skillful means? I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how you apply this as a parent.
Okay, so once again, I will give my best effort and accept the results. So when my mother's dying, I accept. Now, what can I do to help? So Bernie left ZCLA just like about 6 months before I joined. So I never got to study with him directly, but there was one conference that I attended that he was at for lay teachers. And I got to spend a little bit of time with him, and I saw how much he would jump on you as soon as you tried to fix things. So for instance, he was talking about doing street retreats. And one of the other teachers there was Zen Teachers Association. And she said, "Oh, this is great. So you're really gonna help these homeless people." No, we're not there to fix it. We're there to bear witness. And for him, that was the thing. Be open to it. And when you're fully open to it, well, look at this shelter system. We could help with this shelter system. Or these people need a place. They really need a place to go. Let's make a bakery where they could work at it. But you don't, because you can't fix it. Sean had set up I was able to attend the Lakota retreat last year. I'd never been able to do it in person, but my friends who went in person said they were like crying the first day. The alcoholism, the grinding poverty. How are we going to fix this? You can't fix it. And then finally they give up trying to fix, and they're open to the life of the people. And how can we join? How can we open up to them? And oh, by the way, look at this. I know someone who could help with setting up a center here for alcoholism, or something else I can do. All of the actions come from bearing witness. So in a way, in a very real way, it's the situation itself working, and you are the conduit for it. So when you're helping your mom or your son, what is here to work with? What are the ingredients? I have to set myself aside, my need to fix it. See, not going my way. My way is for my mom to still be alive and not be sick. That's not the way. So this is a way of accepting. I accept the way as it is. And part of the ingredients are my views. Part of these ingredients are my abilities, my talents. And my talent says, gee, look at these two things. I can put those together. I can help my mom with this new medication I read about. She's going to die soon, and I want her to be comfortable. That's part of the ingredients. What can I do? If there's no ingredient to help her be comfortable, I accept. Because I gave my best effort to find them, but the acceptance is huge. Accepting this clear moment 100%. That means I had to get me and my little stories, I set them aside. So using a technique like this is a way of getting back to presence. There's nothing wrong with me and my stories. There's nothing wrong with my abilities. I just don't use them all the time. A big part of this me is the presence. So we're connecting with that and then refresh, stepping forward. It may just be that I'm crying because I'm accepting my emotions too. My emotions are part of it. I'm not suppressing anything. I'm living with it. And what can I do? What if you're a cleric, you're a pastor of your church, or you're a teacher or a priest? Someone comes in and so my mom is dying. What do? You don't give them platitudes. So, oh, your mom is now going to the lotus land and everything is going to be hunky-dory. No, you just start crying them. Because exactly, how do we bring this into our life? That's what is great about Buddhism in all its forms, like this one. How do we use it? Okay, we're getting close to time. And I see, maybe, Jeff, do we have time for one more question from Ilya and
Yeah,
Alexander?
we can do one more question, and then we are just a minute over time. But if we have a short one, and then we can wrap up.
Yes, if it's okay, I would like to add and speak directly to Miyoshin, if that's fine, to her grief regarding her mother.
Yoshin,
Yes.
that should be up to you whether you'd like to do that or not.
Yes, just I would like to offer this thought that you can also accept your going back in time and trust the process. As long as you go back, there might be a learning for you, which is then one of the ingredients for your daily actions. And that might be whatever you discover. It can be acceptance, it can be love, it can be something you learn about relationship, but what never vanishes and what you can hold on to during this journey into the past is the love that she gave to you, bringing you here, and the love that you keep always in your heart.
Thank you.
Yeah. That also brings back Mother's Day, Father's Day, the relations. Huge part. Yeah, we can't extricate ourselves from that. Objectively, that would be kind of like the unhuman part. If we just say, oh, we're only in orientation, I'm going to drop all of it off forever. No, this is a continuous cycle. Using every part, every one of these sections is important for us. So the idea is we now have an integrated self. We're all of these. And at certain times, it's appropriate to be in one or another one. So I hope you can use these tools, bring them into your life, try them out. And like Maizumi Roshi said, if it works, good. If it's no good, spit it out. Just leave it. I always like to end with a quote from Rumi. From the hundreds of times I lost the connection, I learned this: your fragrance brings me back.